Welcome to Happy Path Programming. I'm Bruce Eckel.
I'm James Ward. Well, it is a beautiful snowy day in Crested Butte, and it's been a little while since we got together. I've been on the road, but we thought it'd be fun to just do like a catch-up recap on 2025.
Yeah,
and talk about what's
going on,
what's exciting for this new year. So,
most exciting thing is that you can sign up for the Winter Tech Forum.
Oh, nice. Okay, yes. WinterTechForum.com.
Yes, WinterTechForum.com.
Great. And, so that'll be fun.
First week of March. Yeah.
Get some people up here in Crested Butte and work on some fun stuff. And we're going to be back at the Center for the Arts.
Center for the Arts, which is just so much nicer than
it's a delightful space.
Oh, it is a wonderful space. Yeah.
I really like the art room.
The art room is fun. Yeah. And and this time we'll have coffee and things like that. And
oh, nice.
Because what we discovered the first time was that people were spending they had to do kind of a forced march to go get coffee.
Yeah.
That's the one downside.
Yeah, the location is a couple blocks from the nearest coffee shop. So.
Yes.
So. I think I ran over to the gas station and got a gas station coffee one time, and it was okay.
It was okay. It was tolerable.
Yeah.
Yes. So so we're always tuning it up, and then this year we'll have I think maybe as many as 10 students from the university, because that worked out really well last time.
That was great having them.
It was, it's really good to have the, the fresh perspective and, the people who are getting the new
good variety.
Yes. New variety, new energy.
Yeah.
So
nice.
Anyway.
Okay. Well, hopefully people can make it up here for that.
And nobody's going to force you to ski or do outdoor activities, but that often happens. And maybe we'll have good snow by then.
Maybe.
I would think so.
Yeah. So 2025, kind of a insane year in lots of ways. For me, it was lots of travel and then just trying to keep up with the pace of change of everything. 2025 was the most rapid pace year in technology I've ever experienced. We've been through waves of change with, the internet and then the web and mobile and rich internet applications and cloud. And, we've been through these kind of big moments in the past, but this one seemed much bigger and much faster paced than any other year of change I've experienced. But curious how it was for you.
I would say that, I would say the impact that it had on me eventually. I started using AI as soon as it was available. I was in the middle of learning Rust. I was like halfway through, and then AI came along and I started having it create examples for me that I want to know how this works. Create me an example. And my learning accelerated. And it was like, oh, this is great to have this tool. But this year and last year, I would say, I started using it to try writing books.
Yeah.
Books like I've written in the past. And yes, you have to go in and do lots of editing and everything, but it does a ton of stuff for you.
Yeah.
And so for a while, I was thinking that, this is a new way to create books, right? Cool.
Just crank them out.
You can just crank them out because you get this, and you can add your writing on top of that and your usual things. But then I don't know, it was around August, and I hit a wall, which I didn't really understand it at the time. And all of a sudden I just kind of lost interest in like programming.
Yeah.
And I think it's taken me a while to realize. So you remember when Java was just coming in, and before that, everything, the web wasn't there yet.
Kind of with Perl and stuff.
Yeah, we had Perl and stuff, but there wasn't really this, kind of universal web that we have now. And so for a while, there was this period where people were taking documentation from, well, like Java. They would take
Mhm.
the Java documentation and they would write a little bit and then they would fill out a book with
Yeah.
the rest of that.
Yeah.
And before that, getting the docs, like that's a lot of what you paid for
Yeah.
there was all that stuff. And then at some point, the internet got to the point where it was like, well, you would never, I mean, it's so much trouble to even look through the paper documentation. And
Yeah.
that's just, it's all gone away and nobody even thinks about it anymore.
Yeah.
But for a period of time, that was a big deal. It's like, oh, well, that's how you find it.
Yeah.
And I think my recent realization was that the kind of programming books that I've written in the past, even though, yeah, okay, go in and analyze it and everything. AI basically, like
Makes
I
them
don't,
necessary. Yeah.
I don't look stuff up in programming
Yeah.
books anymore.
No. No.
I just ask it, and it does make them unnecessary. And even though I started on several different books and made great progress into them, I think I'm basically gonna give them all up. I mean,
Yeah.
partly is that I don't feel the energy around them, like the Python types book. I haven't felt a lot. I think there's still a lot of we were talking about this over coffee. There's still a lot of resistance in the Python community. They're not ready for it. They don't see the value. They're used to not having types, and they and I don't know if I wanna try and convince them to use types. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just not as interesting to me to try and proselytize, that. And so, I mean, the book is up there. You can see what I've done so far, thinkingintypes.com. If you
Okay.
go to that, you can find it. And I started working on a book with, TypeScript because we're using it for the TypeScript Effect book. And I thought, well, what I'd like is a book that people that you, Bill, and I could go and use
Yeah.
and learn from without having to like go back to the beginning and wade through all of the basics.
Yeah.
Something for people who know at least two
So
languages.
TypeScript, the good parts.
Kind of. Well, yeah, yeah, in a sense. Um, and there's my GitHub repo has what I've worked on,
Huh.
and I used AI for that, and it was very helpful, and I learned a lot. But then we looked at Kit's introduction, and that's really
Yeah.
uh, anyway. I kind of think that the age of books like what I have written in the
Yeah.
past is over. I think the effect book, well, try asking AI
Yeah.
what is an effect, and you're not going to get very good results. So
Yeah.
I still think that
There's still a gap that we can address
yes,
with the TypeScript
but
effect
these
book.
are higher level concepts, and those are kind of what I'm interested in. So
Yeah.
that's for me a big shift.
Yeah. So the
And
more instructional books are just use AI instead of going to a book.
yeah,
But then the more conceptual, um, teaching you a new way of thinking, that still
mhm.
has a place.
Yeah, I think what we're working on with the effect stuff because I don't think anybody, including us, has really come up with the great way to explain it yet.
Yeah.
And so it's worth still working on that. But I think we found even with if you ask AI about effects, we recognize stuff from our own book
Yeah.
that comes back. So it's like, okay, this isn't well explained.
Yeah.
So and
Yeah. There's still a gap that we can
yeah,
address. And I think we should, for the TypeScript effect book, publish an MCP server or something for it. And
mhm,
so people that don't want to read the book and just want to
mhm,
get that knowledge into their AI can. So,
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, might as well go along with it
yeah.
because I don't know. All of the really successful things that I've done have involved um, a kind of leap into faith. Like when I put out the Java book originally, I just put it up on the web. I wasn't even planning on
Yeah.
going to a regular publisher. and I had, different, and it was, I don't know, there's some argument about whether it was the first book that was freely published on the web or not. Who cares?
Huh.
Anyway, it was really early, and it was a risk. And well, and the way that we do the conference, that was a risk. So I'm actually kind of most interested right now in things that don't make sense and yet work anyway. So complexity, basically,
Yeah.
not the deterministic part, but because we get stuck in the ideas of determinism. Well, I think the analogy with effect systems is very good. It's like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had all pure functions, because they're just so reliable. They always give, there's no surprises.
Easily composable,
Completely deterministic. Okay. And that's what people want. Like, people in organizations who are managing, they go, well, we'll follow the rules. Nobody gets fired for following the rules. So we're going to follow the rules. And, we want formulas for everything, but those don't always work. They often don't work.
Yeah.
It's a pit that you fall into. And so I'm interested in how do we change our thinking so that we go, oh, this isn't a deterministic problem. This is a complex problem. It's, the weather or a child or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't use the same strategies.
Yeah.
And so just being able to recognize that you're in a situation where your safe, comfortable, deterministic thinking doesn't work, which is a lot of things. That's kind of where my interest is right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that'll go,
Yeah.
whether that'll actually become a book or not, but it just seems to be forming itself in my head right now.
Huh.
So that's what's going on with me.
So 2025, it's been a year of
big shifts,
shifts in what you want to work on and do, and in some ways motivated by the changes of AI that AI have inflicted on us.
But I didn't even know that when it happened. All I knew was, I mean, I had figured out how to use an airless sprayer, and because I was working on
for painting
my for my steps.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why that's the trigger, but I figured it out. I painted the steps. Very satisfying. It works so much better than other kinds of painting. But then right after that, I just suddenly go, I'm not drawn back to programming. I don't want to do that level anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just, I want to work at a more conceptual level. I'm not sure what it is, but and then in hindsight, kind of realizing, oh, AIs do the thing that I had done for the last 30. So
I've seen other sentiment from people online recently saying like that AI has kind of taken the joy out of programming for them in some way. And it's like the things that they enjoyed about programming have become irrelevant or something. I don't know if I've had that experience. But.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I would just, because I'm still interested. Like when we get together and work on the book, I'm very engaged. But it's a different, it's not just putting out code.
Yeah.
Just the lower level aspects. I started in assembly language. I don't know if you ever.
I did. Yeah.
You had to write assembly language, right? It's like, do you ever want to write assembly language again? No. Because as soon as higher level languages came along, you go, oh, well, this is a tool that will allow me to do more. And assembly language is a grind.
Yeah.
And I think this is the same kind of thing.
Yeah. And reminds me of the blog post that you had shared, which I'll put in the show notes. Yes. But I highly recommend this as a read in this vein for anyone. Well, everyone should read it. The Eternal Return of Abstraction, where programming was never about code. And it's a long read, but really engaging, well written.
Yeah, entertaining. And he has a lot of clever quotes that he attributes to. Yeah. I don't know. It's very entertaining and well written. And
so I think part of his idea with that is that, we had assembly and then we had higher level languages, and we had compilers, and we've had these stair steps of abstraction, TCP, the web. Like we've had all these different kind of layers of abstraction built on other layers of abstraction now, and the AI code assistants are just another one of those. And so if you've talked about this over the last year or more of the AI code assistants being like a compiler. And I think that it is a tool that is making it so, yeah, we don't have to manually write all the code anymore, and we can sometimes move faster and go into new languages like Rust and not have the learning curve where you have to go buy the Rust book, that someone translated from the documentation, and so yeah, it just is a new tool, but we're still necessary at being there to oversee and sometimes have to correct and massage into the right solution.
And we forget these things. Like when higher level languages came along, the assembly language programmers were unhappy because their purpose was being taken away. And I think we're seeing the same thing. And well, I guess you can fight it or you can accept it. Some unconscious part of my brain figured it out and said, "Oh, this isn't actually the interesting problem anymore."
Yeah.
And so I want to follow the interesting problem, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Maybe for me, it's complexity in general, not just about programming, but just the general idea of how do we look at how we solve problems.
It's kind of like a systems thinking kind of approach, and
yeah,
I've had a few good episodes over the years on systems thinking stuff. So.
But I'd like to, yeah. Anyway, so
I wonder how the systems thinking people are using AI in their, how they do systems thinking. I'll have to find somebody that's been in that realm of AI assisted systems thinking.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this past year for me, I think there's been a few highlights. A lot of it has been on the road talking about AI and teaching developers how to build on AI, and it's been really fun. A year ago, I got into MCP, and so that's been a big focus of what I've been, learning and teaching developers how to build systems with MCP. And so yeah, I think for me, it's been, I've written a decent amount of code this year, and of course used AI code assistants to help me in places with that. I've had a few fun little side projects, like the one I was working on this week was the javadocs.dev site, which is just a website that helps you get the Java docs for Java libraries. But a couple months ago added an MCP server for it so that people can like plug that service into their code assistant, and then just started working on the way that it works up until this week was that you had to give it a reference to a library, and then it could go look at the resources in the library. But as I was actually using the MCP server for it, I was like, I actually sometimes want to do like a reverse search. Like all I have is a class or a package name, and I want to like then triangulate to the artifact, and then be able to then get, further documentation from the symbol, not just the library reference, not starting from the library reference, but starting from a symbol within the library. And it's actually kind of tricky because how do you know where that symbol exists to then go be able to find the JavaDoc resource for it? And essentially you could have an index of all of the libraries on Maven Central. There's, millions of libraries. And so it gets a little tricky to build and maintain that index.
And aren't there duplications in symbols across all the libraries?
There are, yeah. And so that also adds to the trickiness. And so just over the last couple of days, I came up with how I'm going to tackle this, and it's live now on the javadocs.dev website and in the MCP server. But the way that I do it is I do maintain an index, and so I had to do some Scala, Zio, Redis stuff to like maintain this index of symbols and their correlation to libraries. But I do that essentially like on demand. Like if somebody loads a library, then I load it into the index. So I'm not like going through the millions of libraries on Maven Central, and which would give lots of false positives. I'm just doing it based on like what has somebody actually looked at on the JavaDocs website or accessed through the MCP server, and then that goes into the index. But it's going to take, lots of usage of the JavaDocs .dev website to be able to like fill out an index kind of completely enough. And so then I was like, oh, the LLMs actually have a pretty good understanding of this relationship between a symbol and a library. And the way that they do this is modeled based on the knowledge of the internet or whatever. And so there's less false positives by going to an LLM and asking it for the correlation between a symbol and a library, because it could hallucinate. I've told it not to hallucinate, but it still could hallucinate.
You mean you have to explicitly say don't hallucinate?
Yeah, basically.
That's not just standard.
Yeah. No, in my prompt I actually say like don't make stuff up. Like if you don't know, don't just make it up.
I just feel like we shouldn't have to say that.
Yeah. So now the default when you look up a symbol is to look for symbols that I've already indexed. And then the fallback is to then go to the LLM and ask it. And actually the LLM does a really good job of uncovering these things. The one caveat to it is that if your library or the symbol that you're looking for is new enough or maybe doesn't have enough references online, then it's not going to be able to find it that way. But yeah, I thought that was a pretty fun little project to get me writing some code and
and you said you had found a problem with something missing in Redis?
Yeah, so I was using the Zio Redis library,
right? And
then I'm running this site on Heroku, and Heroku has a hosted Redis. It's actually a Valkey service, which Valkey is a cool open source project. It's like a Redis fork or something, and so I'm using that Heroku hosted Redis Valkey service, and in order to use it and connect to it, it uses TLS. You have to make a TLS connection, which is supported by Zio encryption, like HTTPS, but for socket communication. So in order to make the connection, you normally would need to validate the certificate of the TLS connection, but on Heroku, they do self-signed certificates, and so you can't validate them against a certificate authority. And so the Zio Redis library didn't support turning off the certificate validation. And so I go into Claude Code and I say, add the ability to turn off certificate validation to the Zio Redis library. And a couple minutes later, it's done. I send the pull request. There was one little change that the owner asked me to made a little change, and then merged the PR and released it. And so within 12 hours, like something that it wouldn't have taken that long to do it manually, but the amount of effort that I put into getting that support into the library was a total of 20 minutes or something like that. And so, yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, there's all these side effects one of the problems that I have with science fiction is that they'll do things like they'll go, well, let's assume that we have, artificial intelligence, but everything around it stays the same. And I think the things that we don't see are the lateral effects. It's like, oh, well, now genetic engineering becomes easier. Now energy creation, finding new materials, all this stuff that gets accelerated, and even things that we do with computers themselves.
Yeah.
And like this is an example was like, oh, well, now the open source community will probably experience a lot of acceleration.
Yeah.
And and I think people are going to be willing to tackle bigger problems as well.
Yeah, like I could have done that all manually, but I probably wouldn't have.
That's a huge thing.
That's the big difference.
Oh my gosh, the number of things that I have done where I go, this is a pain, but to figure out how to automate it, it's too much work. I don't want to. But with the AI, I will ask it, and I'll end up with this whatever it is, some little tool that makes my life easier. And I'm glad I did it, but still without the help, it would just be like, it's a distraction. I don't want to do it.
Yeah. So there's more value creation in
Mhm.
the open source side, I'm sure will happen this year forward looking into
Mhm.
2026. We've lowered the bar for contributions, but it still in many cases does take experienced developers. I did review the code that it generated. I did test the code.
Yeah.
I did my human aspect to it. I didn't just, fire off slop to this open source project, which
Mhm.
is happening. I think that
Sure.
the open source projects, some of them are getting frustrated because people just, drop in these like horrible, horrendous, no human in the loop kind of changes to projects, and then there's maintainability overhead to those and review overhead, and so
I want to say the solution to that is more AI on the side of
so to have
the
the
maintainer
AI
filter
reviewer and
and kick back, and it's like, okay, this is you didn't do all the things, kick it back, and and then that would filter out people just throwing slop at AI projects and overwhelming the maintainers. No, open source projects.
yeah
So,
yeah yeah
I mean, I think the same thing in school. People are, well, if testing, the value of testing is questionable in the first place, but people are going, oh, AI, students are using AI to do all this stuff, and so it's breaking our system. And I go, well, one way to fix it is to use AI at your end to check
yeah
for the use of AI, even though I
the
don't.
arms race of
Yeah,
AI. Yeah,
yeah,
there's some challenges there.
yeah.
um yeah, so that's been a fun project,
Mhm.
and it's great to like have a real MCP server that anyone can use, and that gives me kind of more production experience of what it's like to have an MCP server, and dealing with things like context window sizes. So
Mm.
initially, the Java docs are all HTML, and of course you can throw HTML at the AI. And initially that's what I did with this MCP server is I fetched the Java docs and then return the HTML. But it turns out some of these Java docs can be pretty large because with the HTML files for them. And so I then, and somebody was getting an issue where it was overwhelming the context window of their AI.
Just
And
because
so,
of all the extra HTML
yeah,
stuff.
exactly. And so then one of the changes that I made was to just take the HTML and use JSoup, which is inspired by the Python soup library.
Oh,
Um,
beautiful soup
Beautiful soup,
in
yeah.
Python. Yeah, I mean,
And so I just strip out all the
sure,
HTML and turn it into text,
which
and
is
yeah,
much smaller.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So I
yeah.
think it reduced some of these larger
Mhm.
pages that were getting sent by the MCP server by a fourth. So
Right.
much less context and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's been a fun little project for me to
Mm.
do some kind of real MCP stuff, and that one's all Scala. And it is fun to go back to Scala. I've spent most of the year in Java and Kotlin and Spring and Spring AI and in Babel and, that whole land.
Mhm.
And it's, I don't, I think modern Java is fine. Like I don't like get real passionate about it because I don't have an effect system and don't have some of the things I love. But it doesn't annoy me. Oh, and the AIs are good at writing Java, so that part's
Yeah,
missing.
I guess if I was to do Java at all, I would definitely use the AI for sure to write the build file. Yeah. Remember, because for a while we were talking
uh,
about, oh, we should
Solving the
solving
build
the build
problem.
problem, and
Yeah,
then AI came along, and you're going, yeah, of course I would just use AI to generate my build file, but
yeah,
I don't know. It's uh, well, I've always had a lot of problems with Java, so
yeah.
I'm glad that you're you can you can deal with it.
Muscle through
Yeah,
and
you can muscle through.
yeah.
So you've been teaching a lot of. So is it mostly how to use AI to generate Java, Spring?
Not on the like code assistant side. I
Mhm.
have done some on the code assistant side.
Okay.
So uh, I have done like some how do you integrate MCP servers into your code assistant, and how do you build your own MCP servers, and
Mhm.
but more of what I've been focused on is let's say that you're building a AI system. You want to have a chatbot on a support chatbot, which I flew a bunch over the holidays, and so I got to use the United chatbot, which is absolutely horrible. And I think most of them are.
Most of them are.
And the reason why they're horrible is because they're generally not well integrated to the business systems behind them. So just as an example, on the United one, I'm like, I'm flying tomorrow and you upgraded me, but I need to be downgraded so that I can sit next to my son who's on a different ticket. And the first question they asked me is, what's your confirmation number? I'm like, you are United. You know what flight I'm on tomorrow. Like, be able to pull that information in. And so a lot of what my focus over the last year has been on is teaching people how to build these integrated AI systems that are integrated with their domain logic, with their business processes, and how you would expose your business processes as MCP tools.
And you happen to be using Java and Spring to do that.
And it was a choice to focus on that because so many business systems are built on Java and Spring. It's like that's the place where there's a lot of potential value to people building these AI systems.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Okay, so the primary focus is AI. The implementation is Java and Spring because
that's what
all
the vast majority of businesses are built on.
The COBOL of the modern age.
I actually am working on a blog post to counteract the Java being the COBOL.
Oh yeah, you're arguing against it.
Yeah, because there actually has been a ton of innovation in the JVM and some innovation in the language that I think makes it not super consistent with it being COBOL. I think COBOL has been stagnated for a while, as far as I know. But.
Well, no, they updated it, and I think as recently as the early 2020s.
Yeah,
there's a new
so
version.
There's been some change,
people are. No, I think it's not. I think the analogy is just saying, oh, this is now the language that everybody uses for business.
Yeah,
I think that's.
Yeah.
That's all it means.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that there's any relationship to the features of the language.
Yeah. So in my blog post, I want to go through, here's all the features that have been added probably since you looked at Java last. Because a lot of people, they did Java like 10 or 15 years ago, and that was the last time they looked at it. And there actually has been quite a bit of innovation and things that are very unique to Java that don't exist elsewhere. So as an example, the virtual threads in Java are something that is just a phenomenal, great feature of the JVM that you get just out of the box. All you do is you turn on virtual threads and boom, like you're not blocking actual OS threads when you, which we've come up with all these libraries and ways to do that on the developer side, but why not just have it in the VM that you're running on? So my blog post will go into all the details. Yeah, there was some initial challenges with it. I think Netflix has a blog post where they talked about what their initial experiments of turning on virtual threads and some of the chaos that ensued, and then how they worked with the JVM folks to fix some of those issues. So I think now it's pretty solid, and most people should be able to just turn the flag on and boom, get virtual threads and not have to rewrite into monadic async stuff to get the same kind of benefits. So
okay.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of good stuff there. It's I don't Java's not my favorite language. I think if I'm gonna choose, I'm still gonna choose Scala, even though there's some challenges there. And then if I can't use Scala, I'm going to use Kotlin, and if that doesn't make sense, I'll use Java. But then TypeScript also, like I really try to like push myself to like do more TypeScript, and yeah, I think that's been a fun journey over the last year with us working on this TypeScript effect book. I think there's been a couple avenues of that are interesting. One is just TypeScript itself and learning some of the totally weird things about that language because they have to work with JavaScript.
It's the C++ problem again.
Yeah.
It's like, we got this language everybody uses, and now we're trying to move people forward. And it's like, okay, so, but still some things that we've come across. I mean, like const foo as const is probably never going to be intuitive to me.
No.
It's like, well, because we played with it, and it's like, if you leave off the as const, it behaves differently.
Yeah. there are some
things that
some
that
things in there you're just like,
I feel like
yeah,
they, a different keyword they were trying to. Yeah, every time people try and say, "Oh, we're gonna be a small language. We're only gonna have a few keywords." I don't think that just never works out. Keyword conservation. Sometimes you
yeah,
need a new keyword,
yeah,
and that solves the problem, and
yeah,
it's not that big of a deal.
yeah.
But, you know,
But overall, I think the effect stuff is good, and it's helping a lot of developers move to a new realm of ultimately building more composable, reliable software. And so,
mhm,
I in my Twitter feed, I see a lot of people kind of discovering effect, and it's funny because they don't know the history of it. They don't know like where it came from, and they're just
mhm,
like, "This is great, and I love it, and
mhm,
thank you for solving this composability problem for me."
mhm.
And like, yeah, we've been doing this for a long time in other languages, but it's great that it's now kind of reaching into a new realm of developers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fair to say I mean, we were talking about this morning, the idea that I don't think, um, effect could have been created from scratch in TypeScript. I think it really had to be designed in Scala,
Yeah,
because otherwise all of the, would have just I mean, to do a translation from Zio to TypeScript, okay, because the
yeah,
design is already there and tested, but boy, I can't imagine trying to do it from scratch.
yeah,
It's just yeah, it's not a
yeah,
let's say, not a research language.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful thing about Scala, that you do have these kind of bleeding edge research projects being done,
Yeah,
and
and the language itself is a
and
research project.
that's, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just it's fun to be on the forefront of
Mhm.
innovation. And yeah, there's
Uh-huh.
other languages and other effect systems and other things, and that you could look at, like, oh, Winter Tech Forum, I want to spend time with Flix. So
Yeah.
that's kind of top of my list for things to explore, because yeah, there certainly is lots of different realms of innovation. And but the one that is most relevant to me has been things in the Scala world,
Mhm.
and effect oriented programming stuff. So
Yeah, because Flix has, effects built into it,
yeah,
and it also seems I mean, if you go to the website, it seems to be, complete, ready to feels like it's ready to go. I
yeah,
mean, you can't really tell until you start trying it, but, that's the impression it gives.
yeah, yeah. So
So,
we'll spend some time with that
yeah,
Winter Tech
that would be
Forum.
interesting.
Yeah, so on the effect-oriented programming stuff, I think with all my travel, we've been kind of inching along with that
Mhm.
book. Hopefully, we'll get some more time to spend on that this year. Hopefully, I won't travel quite as much in 2026 as I did in 2025, but would be great to continue making forward
Yeah.
progress on that.
I I'm okay. The thing is, yeah, it's nice to meet weekly, but there are some times that we run into things that I feel like maybe the fact that, you and Bill and I are traveling and we don't get to meet, it allows it to sort of gestate, and
Mm,
we can kind of, I don't know, some of these things don't,
yeah,
just pop together.
yeah. And I think we've all had these moments where we're like, something was percolating in the back of our head, and then we're like, oh, we share on Slack, like, oh, I discovered this thing, or what do you think
Mhm.
about this idea? And so the
Exactly.
recent one from me was that I I think that in effect systems, every side effect requires a thing that the effect is acting on, which we would call the environment, or a layer in Zio and TypeScript effect.
Something that has to be provisioned.
Something that is going to be this bridge to that outside world.
Yes.
And if you don't have that, then it's probably not actually an effect. Sure, in TypeScript effect and in Zio, we often wrap things that aren't really effects into the effect type, just because it makes it easier to to compose a program in
Mhm.
that way. But at its core, an effect really does require that dependency injection kind of piece. Because just as an example, if you have an effect that's going to fetch the current time, that is a side effect, and you need to provide the clock as a dependency to be able to execute that effect. Now, the weird thing with Zio, how Zio and TypeScript effect do this, is that the common dependencies that a system may need are just magically, maybe not magically, they're implicitly provided to you. And
Mhm.
so it does actually, you do have that clock dependency, but you don't actually see it in your code. And
Yep.
so it gets it's maybe one of the trade-offs that you have to make between the explicit, implicit, and comment. Like, do you want to always have to specify that this thing needs a clock? Would that just be too much boilerplate? And so yeah, I think
That's a
they've made some
thing that should
trade-offs on that.
probably be explained. But yeah, and the clock typically is something that you actually just you're not thinking about it in terms of IO. You're going through you just go to the operating system. It is actually IO because it is off the CPU, even if it's on the same die or whatever. But you have all these clocks and you have to do an IO
Yeah.
operation. But that's all
You're leaving the registers of
you are.
what
And that's all buried in the operating system. So, we're used to being able to get clocks, and I don't know if operating systems
randoms and
do operating systems provide random numbers? Or
yeah, it's an OS. Yeah.
that's
The
an OS
OS
thing
call.
too.
Yeah.
Okay. So so you think of those as, okay, that's really an IO thing because I'm going outside and I'm getting something that is unpredictable.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
that is,
Yeah.
I guess maybe that's the main boundary is the predictability versus unpredictability.
Yeah.
Even and that almost always shows up as IO.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some situations where it wouldn't be, but to think about it, it's like, oh, it's
Yeah.
predictable, we can have it as a pure function. Oh, it's unpredictable, now we have to do some other things.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people when they first discover effect, primarily the TypeScript effect one, the value they initially see in it is the error handling, the
Mhm.
ability to in types model that something can fail with a particular error, with many different errors as you compose, and that's certainly a useful part of effect. But you really don't need an effect system to do that. You don't need to go to effect
Right.
oriented programming just to get that. You can just use a sum type if you want,
Right.
right?
I gave a presentation at a couple of PyCons ago showing here's how you would create that kind of system.
Yeah.
And it, yeah, was I did not say effect at
Yeah,
all.
yeah, yeah, and you don't need to,
No,
right? Like
no, it's
it
just
doesn't.
it's
It
a thing.
yeah, and so the thing that I think we've been wrestling with is how do we explain effect systems and effect-oriented programming in a way that is about what problem are we trying to solve, and yeah, there are things that you have to do to be able to solve that problem. Like you need to have a way to provide dependencies to this thing. You have to be able to know did the thing fail or succeed, and in effect-oriented programming, we've modeled that into the type system so that it can all type check and we can validate that you handled all the errors that were possible and you provided all the environment, the requirements, the
And you don't
dependencies.
have the explosive nature of exceptions. You go no exceptions because that just blows everything up.
Yeah, I mean, exceptions, you can use exceptions
Sure.
as an error type, but you don't have to.
Right.
You can model your error types with whatever you
Hmm.
want. And they, at least in Zio, the errors get summed together. I think they do it differently in TypeScript effect due to some weird thing with TypeScript, but it's like
Hmm.
an intersection type or something.
Yeah,
But
but I think you still
it's,
get the effect of, oh, if we compose these uh, operations together, and if any of them have an error, it comes out as the composed.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, I think, the ultimate goal is to
Yeah.
say, I don't want to have to think about every error just because I'm putting this thing in or that thing in. I want to be able to compose these things, and the composed item operation
Is
has its
actually the
own
composition of the
of
dependencies and the errors. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and presumably the provisions that you have to give it, which
Yeah.
yeah, I was a little confused about it first, but then one of the things you said this morning was, which I think is really key, is that people for this to make sense to people, they have to have built some larger systems where they can't just shoehorn the various, you can't just hack it together. You're just going, no, this is too big. We have to have a provisioning phase,
Yeah.
and we can't just throw exceptions willy-nilly because they get lost. We have, the system, it's a scaling problem.
Yeah.
Yes, we're up to a scale, and also managing all the code whenever we need to change things around a little bit just becomes overwhelming. And that's see that I think is
the refactorability and
is the the marketing argument for this, is to say, okay, here are the problems that we're solving, and you're not going to see them unless you're starting to deal with bigger systems.
Yeah.
And then, maybe that then maybe we'll avoid confusing people who haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah.
Doing, why are you loading all this extra stuff onto me? Well, it's not extra when you get to a bigger system. It actually reduces.
Yeah.
But in a little, we run into that scaling problem a lot in programming. It's like, oh, hello world, it's easy.
Yeah.
Just say, well, I guess they finally fixed it in Java where you can actually say hello world after 2.5 decades or whatever. Now you can actually do it, but it's like, anyway, hello world. And then when it gets bigger and bigger, all of a sudden it just, the scaling issue.
Yeah. So, you mentioned Kit. He has some great resources on explaining exactly this with TypeScript effect. Is that initially when people look at a TypeScript effect application, they may be like, oh my God, that's a lot of code just to do something very simple. And a story that's often not told there is that there's so many different concerns that are being managed by this layer of abstraction
that you don't need in hello world.
Yeah, exactly.
But you do need when your system scales up. And a lot of that stuff falls through the cracks in systems that people build now. Because I don't know. I mean, either they don't know about it, or they forget, or it just seems like too much work, and we're just trying to get something up and going. And wouldn't it be nice if you could get something up and going and those concerns were addressed automatically, so you didn't have to go back and refactor later, which doesn't seem to happen as much as we wanted it to.
Yeah, I guess there's the meta topic about abstractions and like, how do you see the value of an abstraction? It's when you get to a certain level of complexity that you need that abstraction, or maybe you're opting into like a larger ecosystem that gives you, composability or whatever. So I'm sure that at some point when HTTP was created, somebody was like, that's an unnecessary abstraction. I can just use TCP for this. And I think the case, it goes back to that blog post on abstractions. It's like we keep adding these new levels of abstractions, and you may not see the value in a certain abstraction until you get to a certain level of complexity or the need to opt into an ecosystem. Like in the Zio ecosystem, when I was working on that JavaDocs project, I was just like there's a Zio Redis library. Yeah, it didn't quite work on Heroku right out of the box, and I had to do that whole thing. But I could just pull that in, and I had it set up in minutes, and so
because you didn't have to do all the little fiddly wiring. Because it's a operation that encapsulates its own side effects. And my observation has been, and that was something I got not from the Zio docs, but from the effect docs, where they said that. And I initially was like, oh, that's a much clearer way of doing it. But then I realized, but that's just describing how. It is not describing what. And so what we really want to say is, it's an operation that's easily composable and you can shift things around easily. And ultimately you don't have to do the fiddly little wiring for everything. And so that means that if you go, this should happen before that, it becomes an effortless process. Or if you want to do what you did, I can just stick that in there and the wiring is taken care of for me.
Yeah, and I think some people may look at that abstraction of effect systems and say like, oh, I've got dependency management, with Spring or whatever, or I've got error handling with a sum type, or I can do concurrency in this way or whatever. And so why is it that we need a new abstraction that encompasses all those pieces together? And I think that's part of the missing piece that we'll hopefully tackle in the TypeScript revision of the effect-oriented programming book is like the bigger picture of why effects matter and why you need dependency management, why you need encapsulation of state,
Yes.
why you need the error channel, why you need all these things to get you to this thing that you're ultimately trying to accomplish.
Yes, the composability of operations. Yeah, yeah. We hoped for that with objects. We thought that maybe objects would solve that. Oh, we could just now we've got these libraries. We can easily stick them together, and there were aspects of it that were better.
Yeah.
I think I'm to the point now where I would say it's the core of an object is a type. And the type part was what made it work really well.
Yeah.
And hanging every possible method off of it, and then the inheritance thing and all that, that didn't help. But we kept at it because we go, oh, but the types, we weren't thinking this, but ultimately it was like, oh, but being able to create a type is a really useful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Modeling the world and inheritance hierarchies and all that.
The tentacles of how the objects all interconnect in mysterious ways and then mutate state. It's like that's where things went off the rails, and inheritance.
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what we're seeing is okay. Let's version 2. Let's look at it. And now what we're composing is not objects but operations. And in order to easily compose them, we have to encapsulate, the operation has to encapsulate its side effect, but that's an implementation detail.
Yeah.
What you experience when you go, oh, I need this library, I'll stick it in, wiring happens because of the way it's designed, and off you go. It only takes you a few minutes. And Bill has talked about this. He goes, oh, something that would have taken weeks to change, I can just do this and it's working.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we
compile to unvalidated, refactorable, testable?
Yes. And how do we show that to the point where people go, it's worth the effort?
Yeah.
Because it is.
Yeah. Because there is overhead
effort,
to it.
Because you're changing your perspective on what programming is from I don't know what, I guess wherever you're coming for, object-oriented programming or even functional programming. I write code and it does stuff. And if I have to do some tweaks here and there to make it work fine, oh, now it's hard to change. I don't want to change it. So I'm going to resist consciously or unconsciously making my code better. And then it becomes fossilized.
Yeah.
And so if we could show, oh, now we're just really, we've actually at least moved closer to having this component.
It's one of the big challenges that we face with explaining effect-oriented programming is that, as we're saying, the value of it is much more evident in a complex system.
Yes.
It's very hard to represent a complex system in a book.
Yes.
Right. It's like we're not going to build a CRM and have all the code for the CRM and be like, look how complex this is. Now let us show you how effect makes it easier. And so it's I think at one point we wrestled with just like the hello world. Like, do you start your hello world with a single effect? A single effect isolated from everything else has zero value.
It looks dumb.
Yeah, like why would you ever have a single effect? The whole point of effects is to compose together multiple things. And so I think it's one of the challenges we face. I don't know. Hopefully in 2026 we're going to figure this out.
I don't think it connects with someone who hasn't struggled with a bigger system.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you've only done, small utilities or, what was the last thing? Microservice.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, if microservices, that's another attempt to create a kind of a composability system.
Yeah.
Oh, all of these things will be isolated, and we'll just talk to each other, and it'll all be great. And it's like, yeah, it
Maybe.
helps some, maybe, I
Yeah.
guess. But
I've had similar challenges with MCP
Mhm.
and explaining why MCP, because MCP has this abstraction over essentially RPC, over
Mhm.
like JSON RPC.
Right.
And so one of the questions that I often get around MCP is, why do I need this MCP abstraction over it? Because I could just do raw JSON RPC or whatever, whatever you want to do. And the answer is very similar to the effect systems. It's like, well, if you were to, in your company, start building MCP or pre-MCP, you were to start building these like LLM integrated things, tools that your
Just using
LLM
JSON
could use,
RPCs.
doing whatever, is you'd probably build about 6 of them, and then you'd say, I probably need an abstraction for all of these so that there's commonality of how these things work, and then I can maintain them and get some reuse and all this kind of stuff. Like, you'd probably build your own abstraction. And
Mhm.
so the value of MCP in a lot of ways is that it is your abstraction over those things. And if you're only building one tool, if you only ever plan on having one tool and never integrating with any off-the-shelf MCP servers, then maybe you don't need MCP. And so I think it's very similar to our challenge with effect-oriented programming, is like, you have to kind of at least anticipate or expect or be in a level of complexity that the abstraction fits with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, you have to run into scaling problems and also be aware that you've hit a scaling
Yeah.
problem and that you need a solution to it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I
And
think
scaling can be in multiple different vectors, because it could be team size.
Yeah.
So one of the things that people complain about with effects is like I'm just one developer. I'm the only person working on this problem. Like I don't see the value. And it's like, okay, now think about if you're in an organization with 10, 100,000, 10,000 developers, and how you're collaborating together. And that's where having things represented as types, having the error values represented in those types, is really valuable. And so some of those things aren't evident until you get to scale, not just in complexity, but also in
human communication boundaries.
Yeah.
And where you need a consistency at those boundaries, so that it isn't just a free for all.
Yeah.
Because we've been doing that for a while now.
Yeah.
And we've seen the effect of a free-for-all, which is that you get one of these ossified systems that sometimes becomes unmaintainable and people have to rewrite it from scratch. Ooh, that's expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2026 will keep chipping away at explaining effect-oriented programming.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. It is an interesting problem to solve.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's stimulating, I have to say. I'm glad that we did this. For the first few years was just, I was in a stupor, I had to say.
What are we even doing here?
I had no idea what was happening. So the benefit of that is that I know what it feels like to be confused about the thing. And so maybe it will give me the ability to explain it better, because I understand, I can empathize with the people who are going, what?
Yeah.
Why would you do this?
Yeah.
I can write this program without all of that and it works fine. And the answer is, okay.
Yeah.
Do that until you run into a problem, then come back and talk to us.
I guess my naive hope is that people will, developers will be able to see that at some point they may reach the point of complexity that they're going to need something else, and that the overhead of rewriting into the thing versus having started with the thing, that the abstraction that's going to make it easier down the road, is worth it up front. And maybe that's not universally true. Maybe you just are like, hey, I'm never going to, get to a level of complexity and team size or
I don't know
system
if we
complexity
can achieve that goal in the book.
Yeah.
I think what we can say is, okay, this is for when systems get more complex than you can manage. And, when you feel like everything is out of control, if this doesn't make sense to you now, come back then and it'll probably make sense to you.
Yeah.
Some argument like that, because I think trying to
Yeah.
compel the ideas without that context of oh, we're building a bigger system. You've hit a scaling issue. Without that context, I don't know. I guess I've seen it's like types in Python.
Yeah.
It's like there's a ton of programmers out there who are going, why would I add this? I initially was doing it on bigger things, but then I've gotten to the point where it doesn't matter because it gives me information. It gives the compiler information, well, the type checker information. It gives the LLM information. I
Hmm.
feel like my Python generated code has been better because I say always use types
Yeah.
and I can read it better. It has valuable information in it, but there's a lot of people out there who just say, I I can do it without that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess you just say, all right, as long as your thing keeps working for you, I'm I can't really talk you into doing more
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
until you hit the problem.
So I think what will at least move the needle on this is when the AI code assistants are better integrated into the type checkers. And
Yes.
then later, once they're integrated into the effect systems. And so
Mhm.
what I mean by that is right now your AI code assistant that you're using with Python, even with the types, it's getting text information about your source files.
Yeah.
And what if instead the LLM, your AI code assistant, could actually go out to the compiler and be like, "Tell me about this type. What parameters does it have? What other things are available here?"
Yeah.
And get all this information about the AST of your program, not just the textual representation of the program. So, what if the code assistant could do that? Then all of a sudden, your types have a lot more value because your AI code assistant has a much deeper and better understanding of the world that your code is living in. So that's like probably going to happen in 2026. We'll get these like
Wow.
AI code assistants integrated with type systems in
Wow.
ways that types all of a sudden become a lot more valuable. But then the next level of that is do the same thing with effect systems
Mm.
and be able to have all the knowledge about what the effect system understands with dependencies and error types and all the things that are happening in being managed for you by an effect system. Then do the same thing with the code assistants, and that's where then I think we can move the needle on the applicability of or the um, reducing the resistance to the overhead because the value becomes much higher.
Yeah, right. And if you lower the bar of figuring it out, if you can say, here's a problem I'm trying to solve it using effect or ZO or whatever. And because my experience with Rust was I had gotten a good way into it just by watching videos and trying things out. But as soon as I was able to go, I wonder how this works, write me an example of that.
Mm,
It just
yeah,
accelerated my understanding. And so, because your understanding doesn't just happen to be however a book or a tutorial or whatever goes.
yeah,
Your understanding, you go, I don't understand this thing. You can ask, you can get an example. You go, I get it now.
yeah.
And I think that's going to really lower the barrier and allow people to experiment more and then start building their own bigger systems. I think
That's right.
ultimately what I'm interested in, I've always been interested in, is the power that tools give smaller groups of people, because all the studies that I've done with organizations is when you get a certain size and you have to bring in management, at least industrial age management, which we're still stuck in, then everything grinds to a halt. And so if you can give these powerful tools to smaller groups and avoid, you know,
Yeah.
as much management as possible, then you're going to be able to move forward faster and create much better,
Yep.
more interesting experiments.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting year. So I'm looking forward to diving into all that. The other thing that I've been doing a bit with and look forward to doing more with is an agent framework that we haven't had Rod on, have we, to talk about in Babel. Did we have Rod on to talk about in Babel?
Rod Johnson?
Yeah.
We did have Rod Johnson.
We did, but this was like pre in Babel, maybe? I don't know. I'll have to look back at our.
I think
we did have him on to talk about him. Okay.
Yeah.
So the Babel agent framework, Rod continues to just do some really amazing things around building AI systems that are more deterministic and more. A lot of the benefits we talk about with effect-oriented programming, like you want to be able to have better composition. You want to be able to have logic that's shared across different parts of your large enterprise agent system. And so I think he's doing some really interesting stuff. He his most recent one was on RAG, which RAG is this technique for how you basically inject data into an LLM. And so he looked at all the different approaches that people were doing with RAG, and he was like, these are all wrong. Like, this is not the right abstraction. And so, as Rod often does, which I think is amazing, is he goes back to research papers and he mines through research papers, and he found one that I think was like another part of Mbabel came out of like building games. And he's like, this is the right abstraction for RAG. And so we just did a video live stream with Rod a couple weeks ago on the Coffee and Software podcast, where he described his whole approach to RAG and how it's this new way of doing it. And I think he's totally right. Like the rigor of doing this in not the like sloppy, let's just throw it together way, but really it took him a while to add RAG support into Mbabel because he really wanted to come up with the right abstraction.
Sure.
So all that to say, I'm excited to dive further into Mbabel in this year and build some interesting stuff with it and teach people how to build more reliable. Ultimately, I want the United chatbot to actually work, and that's my end goal: is getting
United Airlines chatbot.
Yeah, exactly. Getting them to build something on Mbabel so that I don't every single time have to talk to an actual agent.
Right.
I'd like to just talk to an AI agent once.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Some of the things that you see with those AI. Oh, we're here to help you. What do you want to know? And then it like. You ask it something about its own system and it doesn't know it, and you're just going, oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the web was terrible at first.
Exactly. So. And we are at that phase where things are early and we're coming up with the better abstractions for these things. And so I'm excited about diving further into all that in 2026.
Yeah. It's still pretty interesting.
Yeah. So any other like things you're excited about for this year?
I'm still in this transition phase. I'm still just kind of trying to figure it out, what value I can add to the world now that it's not really programming anymore.
Yeah.
Other than the stuff that we're talking about. Yeah. No, just I've been doing a lot of painting. I've been doing more painting. I just took a painting workshop, which was really good.
Nice.
And so exploring all kinds of stuff with that, different mediums and things. Fun. And some of the experimentation. Bill Fraser has been working on we've always tried to replace the Open Spaces board.
Yeah.
And I think he's actually onto something now, because what we always did was we would say, well, let's just take the Open Spaces board and somehow put it into the computer. And Bill said, maybe we need to rethink this from, let's start from the fact that everybody's going to be using their phones and work out from there rather than this idea of Post-it notes on a board. And I think he's really onto something. And he's hoping to have something that we can try out at the conference.
Nice.
So Yeah. So that should be
He showed me the latest version of
Oh,
it.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
good.
a couple weeks ago, and
Yeah.
it's getting really good. There's a lot
Yeah.
of good stuff in it, but we discovered a few bugs on iPhone. So the Safari browser or whatever was doing something different than he's on Android, and
Right.
so
And so
I
am
think
I.
he pointed his AI at the problem and said, but one of the challenges with that is like to set up the AI agent is going to be most effective if you can give it a test to run.
Right.
And UI gets tricky because it's like, all right, am I going to spin up an iPhone simulator for the AI to use? And you certainly can. There's just some challenges with that. So
yeah. But I think it has a lot of promise, and I think it's something that could be used for anybody who wants. I think it would make it easier for people to do open spaces events if they had this tool. So I'm pretty jazzed about what he's been working on. For that.
You know what I should work on with that is it wouldn't be that hard. Well, maybe. I want. Yeah, I'm just getting dreamy about
what you think.
About what I actually have time to do.
Right.
But we should have a chatbot in the new Open Spaces app, and so you can open the chatbot and you could just natural language do things as well. And then it would be interesting to see like how many people would prefer the UI to the chat.
Yeah, I feel like the UI is pretty straightforward. So, but yeah. Anyway, it could
be a fun experiment.
Could be an experiment. You could do it as a hack day project.
Yeah. Actually, that would be good.
Yeah, and then we could try it out, see if it works.
Yeah.
Should be
and if it works better than the United Airlines chatbot, I'll be happy.
Well, I think you just said everything will work better than that right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, happy 2026, and we'll hopefully do more episodes this year. I just need to be on the road a little less.
Yeah, and there's some interesting people. I think we have potential to talk to. So
for sure.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks. Go ahead and sign up for the Winter Tech Forum, everybody.
Yeah.